Greetings, students! If you are joining us for the first time, I urge you to like and subscribe and hit the alarm bell for notifications. And if you would like more, please do visit the link below to the university bookshop. It has been quite some time. I am glad to report that I am finally free from the shackles of my position at Miskatonic University, which place I have left following a truly unpleasant row with administration. I don't particularly want to get into all of the drama, but the TLDR is that the ghost of the university's founder had some truly unpleasant remarks to make about various students and friends, and that it ended up being mutually agreeable to part ways. Once I left, I confess I did a little hoboing myself. I caught a ride up to the Arctic, where I bummed about in a most bohemian fashion, until I eventually ran into a stitched-together man who's made that continent his home. We got to be rather good friends, and by his connections at the University of Ingolstadt, he was able to secure me a position at a little-known sister university in the Mojave Desert, a space called Scorched Sands. And so, my constitution restored by the midnight sun, I returned to Arkham, gathered up my things, and hit the road. The popcorn man has come with me, and so too did my assistant Sheila. A new adventure. As part of my signing on negotiations, I have handed the reins of this channel over to my new employer, so you're likely to see more content from other departments here in the future, as well as my recorded lectures, such as this one. Speaking of which, let's begin. There is a figure I've been studying lately, and I believe that I've had something of a breakthrough. I've known for some time about this artist, Zdzislaw Beksinski. Zdzislaw Beksinski. Yes. He described his own painting genre as dystopian surrealism, and yes, dystopian indeed. His drawings and paintings include megalithic structures in ruin and huge piles of corpses. When there are living figures, they are typically ragged, little more than skin stretched tight over bone. The colors are bleak, and the distances hazy. But among the monsters and corpses that litter his paintings, there is another peculiar force. Sinister, but with childlike, geometric simplicity. Here's one now. As early as 1970, Beksinski was creating paintings of demonic emojis. Looking at paintings like this brings up the question, very often the one posed in talkback sessions on college campuses: where do you get your ideas? The answers vary by artist, of course. Some draw their inspiration from nature, some from emotion, and some from what they see, some from what they imagine. But this brings us to the second part of Beksinski's dystopian surrealism. The surrealists, like Beksinski, get their art from somewhere else. A psychologist will tell you that they get their inspiration from the subconscious, but there is another theory that takes into account certain parapsychological facts that I believe you, my students, should already be familiar with. A touchstone artistic process that we've often explored on this channel is something we call Cthulhu's Dreams. To briefly recap, in the short story The Call of Cthulhu by Howard Phillips Lovecraft, the aforementioned unfortunate founder of Miskatonic, there is a monstrous horror slumbering beneath the ocean, whose dreams have such psychic authority that they influence the so-called subconscious processes of artists the world over. It is my belief that these psychic waves do in fact exist, though I don't have reason to believe that their point of origin is an antediluvian squid dragon, as Mr. Lovecraft suggests. The subjective experience of an artist drawing on their subconscious is in fact as mysterious to themselves as it may seem to we on the outside. In an interview with The Atlantic magazine in 2008, filmmaker David Lynch described his creative process as there being a man in another room with a whole film together, but they're in puzzle parts, and he's flipping one piece at a time into me. In an instructional art book by Salvador Dali entitled 50 Secrets of Magic Craftsmanship, he confides ultimately in his 50th secret that no other secrets matter, but that at the moment where you sit down before your easel to paint a picture, your painter's hand will be guided by an angel. These are attestations of the external impetus on surreal artists by people in the best position to know, the artists themselves. Lovecraft's figuration of this is as a slumbering dead god is similar. So, we might take Dali's angel, Lovecraft's Cthulhu, and Lynch's man in the next room to all be figures of something. But figures of what? The psychological insistence that these are mere reflections of the interior of the artist seems to me to be nothing more than a complicated semantic argument, as though they were arguing that a perception is not real because it is the result of light reflecting off an object instead of being the object itself. The impressions that the artists regurgitate are impressions of something, and they are impressions formed by larger senses than the 5 we've been given in grade school. The accomplishment of Unicode 8.0 has been well documented on this channel. The assembly of those 72 emojis was an act of such spiritual violence that I believe it sent ripples fore and aft in time. And the artist on whom those waves broke was none other than Zdzislaw Beksinski. Examining some of these paintings can tell us something about the emojis represented. Take this, which represents U+1F62E, face with open mouth, and corresponds to the demon Marchosius. On a purely graphical level, you can appreciate the addition of detail. The curly K shape on either side of Marchosius' glyph is rendered as hollow cheekbones that are lost in the simplification of the emoji. But this image also fills in different details than we inherited from the medieval account. Regarding that medieval account, Reginald Scott, from whom we get much of the information that we have on specific demons, says, Marchosius is a great marquess. He showeth himself in the shape of a cruel she-wolf, with a griffin's wings, with a serpent's tail, and spitting, I cannot tell what, out of his mouth. When he is in a man's shape, he is an excellent fighter. He answereth all questions truly. He is faithful to all the conjurer's business. He was of the order of dominations. Under him 30 legions he hopeth after 1200 years to return to the 7th throne, but he is deceived in that hope. First, I would like to point out that this description, as many in the grimoires do, describes multiple physical forms for the demon. This fortifies my thesis that the emojis are in fact portraits of those denizens of the pit. They need not look like the horned, pitchfork-wielding man to be a demon. But it is where there are correspondences and overlaps that I am most interested. Here is the rendition of Marchosius from the above description in Jacques Collin de Plancy's Dictionnaire Infernal. As you can see, this interprets the above text, but does not necessarily show any direct experience with the entity described. Look what he's done with the phrase, spitting I cannot tell what out of his mouth. No. This image is not inspired, but is simply a catalogue of physical traits described in the source material. Contrariwise, look again at Beksinski's rendition of Marchosius in his form as U+1F62E face with open mouth. Spitting I cannot tell what from his mouth, indeed. In fact, the confusion doesn't stop with the identity of the material that Marchosius expectorates. In Beksinski's rendering, there is an entire host of creatures entering the mouth of the demon. Though the strict significance of this still eludes us, I cannot help but feel that this painting is a visual description that helps us to understand more clearly what we are dealing with when we may try to express ourselves with emojis. I do find it interesting that this is one of the fell creatures that Scott tells us hopes to regain its place in heaven. Is this Pac-Man-like consumption of these lesser demons an attempt at repentance? Might Marchosius be enlisted to proper ends in the hopes of regaining salvation? And can we trust Scott, who mistook this ingressive material as expectorant, to know the future of this spirit's eternal soul? I intend to make an addendum video or two in which I go into similar depth on several other of Beksinski's emoji portraits, of which there are a few more than 10. But for now, I want to focus on one of the less obvious paintings. This painting corresponds to U+1F912 Face with Thermometer, who is a goetic demon named Person. Note the use of red, how the trumpet has become the mercury of the thermometer, and the red blush of the face is maintained in the two depictions. There may well be a connection between this trumpet and the element of mercury, which plays a central role in the alchemical magic of the Middle Ages. About Person, Scott has this to say: Person, alias Curson, a great king, he cometh forth like a man with a lion's face, carrying a most cruel viper, and riding on a bear. And before him always go trumpets. He knoweth things hidden, and can tell all things, present, past, and to come. He beareth treasure, he can take on a body, either human or airy. He answers truly of all things earthly and secret, of the divinity and creation of the world, and bringeth forth the best familiars. And there obey him 22 legions of devils, partly of the order of virtues, and partly of the order of thrones. I do find it interesting that this trumpeter is linked to a demon who is said to be preceded by trumpets. This leads me to suggest that perhaps this emoji is not a depiction of Person himself, but rather a symbol of Person in the form of his herald. Before him go always trumpets. Indeed. But this trumpeter does not look particularly human. Though he has an ear, nose, mouth, and even on close examination seems to have closed eyes, what is it about this figure that seems so strange? Ah yes, there it is. The hands. These fingers are a mess, and the wrists splay at bizarre, contorted angles. This is the herald of the demon, almost human, but with mangled hands. Surely such an image is consigned exclusively to the crooked crystal through which Beksinski saw his visions. If only. Perhaps you, my students, being generations younger than my white-haired self, have beaten me to the punch. But this is exactly the sort of image rendered by artificial intelligence, AI. It has been well documented and discussed the whole internet round. Why does AI depict hands like this? What's so hard about hands? Think pieces have been written to suggest that actually hands are really hard to draw, but photorealistic faces incredibly easy. I don't believe it. There is another Lovecraft story that bears relevance here, one called Pickman's Model. This concerns the other kind of artist, one that doesn't draw on the subconscious, but rather can only recreate images from obsessive and precise copying of what stands before them. The climax of the story, and beware spoilers here, is that the nervous and brilliant young horror artist is able to paint such vivid monsters because he calls them up and can copy their likenesses in person. AI is such an artist. Artificial intelligence can only construct images, collage-like, out of what it has already seen. But where, dear student, could the algorithm have seen an image like this? Machine psychology and perception is little understood. Machine spirituality, even less so. But what we have here is an image of the emoji's herald. The AI portrait gives us a real-time snapshot of the malicious spiritual entities that revel inside of the internet, on the spiritual plane most clearly visible to the internet's central intelligence. Reginald Scott's discovery of witchcraft, which we have quoted in this installment to give us context for the medieval conceptualization of the demonic personages mentioned, always attributes a number of legions to the demons it describes. Until now, this was a notion that mystified me. Why list 72 demons when there are in fact thousands upon thousands? What is the difference? Now I feel like we are tiptoeing toward an answer. The demons themselves, the emojis, are at once simpler and more powerful than those they lord over. The others, the heralds for example, are almost, or perhaps once were, human. They are beginning their transformation, perhaps, or merely suffering strange changes. Here, I would like to return to the equivalence of the thermometer and the trumpet. In our video about emojis in MoMA, we established that in the context of emoji demonology, red is the color of fire. Fire has the classical properties of hot and dry. Similarly, because of its use of the thermometer, we understand this material to represent mercury. In alchemy, mercury, quicksilver, represented the mind or the life force. The ability of mercury to freeze and melt around room temperature made it a symbol of the dead coming to life. The solid mercury melting was considered a symbol of something dead, inert, coming to life, motion. Consider the phrase, the quick and the dead, in which quick is a substitute for the word living. Ergo, quicksilver, or living silver. So, if we combine the iconography of red equals heat via fire with the suggestion of quicksilver in a thermometer, we have an image of quicksilver heating up, or the dead coming to life. A demonically perverse meaning for an emoji that indicates sickness. And 2, this is refigured as the trumpet, which is a call to arms. The call for the pestilential dead to return to life. But we also know from the person entry that this is a trumpet call that precedes a meeting with person. There is a famous line regarding Cthulhu's dreaming state. That is not dead which can eternal lie, and with strange eons, even death may die. Could it be that the symbol of the trumpet is indeed a suggestion that the entities perceived, as their coders say, created by artificial intelligence are in fact sounding the trumpet, which could wake those entities, e.g. person, who for centuries have lain dormant in dusty tomes, but with the internet distributing their icons, are achieving a new life? Perhaps. Let us hope that what is dreaming may indeed stay dead. In the meantime, please do like and subscribe. And once again, I urge you to click the link to the university's bookshop below and peruse the wares crafted with love by my puppeteer and his partner. Until next time, may the pyramid's eye watch over us all.